Welcome to part two. In our last episode, we were taking a look at sort of the value of believing. And in this episode, I want to take a look at the tools of believing. And the next one, we're going to look at the skills of believing. The idea is that, believing, let's say it's kind of like building a house or something like that. We're building a fence right now out in our yard. And you want to understand what it is that you're trying to build. That's kind of what the value is. Why am I doing this thing? But then you're going to take a look at what are the specific tools that you would use for that construction. And so maybe you have a skill saw, maybe you've got a speed square, and you've got a paint roller, and things like that you're using to kind of put this together to construct the product that you want to create. And then after that, you've got sort of the skill of using those things. So just because you have a speed square, it doesn't mean that you know what to do with a speed square or when to use it. And specifically, when it gets a little bit more complicated, you'll find that the purpose of a speed square is not all that it does. I'm leaning into that one pretty heavy because I don't know if you guys watch Reels and TikTok, but it's easy to get sort of lost in it, and that's been happening to me a little bit. I've been looking into them, trying to learn how to make them, actually trying to build the tools and the skills of making TikToks. And as you go in, you learn a lot about yourself because you discover which ones you like to watch, what captures your attention. And I love watching the ones on construction tools. And there are all these videos that are people using a speed square to measure and make cuts on complicated things that I would never think of using my speed square for. I just thought it was for making a perpendicular line. And I'm like, hey, that's great. I can make a nice straight cut. But man, they use it for so much cool stuff. And I find myself really drawn to it, which is fascinating on one hand, but also is kind of helpful in the scope of what I'm talking about today, that you want to have a speed square, first of all, and then you want to know what it's used for. But then there's an incredible amount of depth that goes into what it can be used for. For some very advanced and more complicated applications, it can do amazing things and it can really make some beautiful products. Well, it's very similar when we're taking a look at belief. There are specific tools that can be used to build belief intentionally. The idea being that we tend to think as we grow up that we just think what we think, that thoughts just come in our head, and if thoughts come in, we have to think them. And we hear words like meditate and maybe think like, oh, well, I don't meditate. I don't meditate very well. It's not something that I pursue. And then we discover that actually we do meditate. We just meditate on default things. I meditate a lot on the reasons that I can't do something or the reason that something might be hard. And I don't realize that I'm meditating, but I'm just rehearsing it over and over again. And so what we want to look at are the specific tools that we can use to just be more intentional and be directing that process a little bit more. Because as we saw in the last video, there's great value in believing what you want to believe so that you can produce the results that you want to produce in your life. So I'm just going to go through and in this episode, I'm just going to explain all the tools. And in the next episode, we'll dive into the skills of how to apply those tools to some more complicated and tricky situations to get even more beautiful results. Skill number one is awareness. And I kind of look at this in two different parts. You've got your thought downloads and your thought evaluation. And so it's awareness of what you're thinking and then awareness of the value of that thought are sort of the two things. So a thought download is a pretty simple tool. You set a timer and you start writing down on a piece of paper everything that's in your mind. I generally set a specific topic. I'll put like a topic, maybe work. I'll put work or money or Whitney, marriage, something like that, my marriage. And I'll just start writing down all the thoughts because I want to see what's in my mind. The idea of this is really just to like flip on a light in a dark room is all that it is. And I want to have a look around. And so the way that I do that is I just start writing and I don't evaluate anything. I don't try to have good thoughts. I don't try to have bad thoughts. I don't try to, word the thoughts in a specific way. It's just very flowing stream of consciousness, putting stuff down. Now, once the timer goes off and I've got it all down, then I go back and I check and I see if I ever wrote a question. Do I think of Whit enough or something like that? And then I realized that I want to change that question to a statement. And so I just cross out, do I think of Whit enough? And I would rewrite, I don't think of Whit enough. And I just noticed that my brain is thinking, I don't think of Whit enough. And so the question is sort of like a soft thought. And when you switch it around and you write it in a way that actually connects with you in an emotion, that's going to be the most effective way to see that. And so then once I have this list now edited, I can kind of go through it and I can see, oh, wow, there are a few thoughts in here that surprise me, or that maybe I didn't want to see in there, or that I want to evaluate. I want to check and see what I think of them. So that leads me to the second part of it, and that's really just asking a few questions. First, is it 100% true? And that's a really important question, because is it 100% true is how you determine whether something is a thought or a fact. Now, a lot of thoughts have a lot of truth, but they're not 100% true. Whereas 2 + 2 = 4, that's 100% true. There aren't circumstances where that's not true. If I go back to my thought, I don't think of Whit enough, I can see that that's true sometimes. Sometimes I don't think of Whit as much as I would like to. If I looked at my highest self, I would be more thoughtful of her more. But there are also times when I do think of Whit. So it's not 100% true. I don't even need to know the percentage. It's just, is it 100% true? Yes or no? And you'll find that usually it's no. Even if something's 99% true, that's still not 100%. And so then I ask myself, is this thought serving me? Does this thought seem to, on a gut level, have a positive or negative influence in my life? Does it take me toward a goal that I have or away from the goal? And then I ask myself, who would I be without this thought? And so I just imagine, if in some imaginary land I thought something different, what would I be like? How would that have changes in my life? Who would I be? And so that's the whole evaluation. At the end, I might say, do I want to keep this thought then? Once I see those three things, have that in place. And if I decide that, no, I don't, well, then I would jump into a process of sorts of getting rid of that thought. And that's what this whole thing is about managing beliefs. So that's the first tool, all about awareness, getting them out on paper, and then the quick evaluation, the 3 questions. Is this 100% true? Does it serve me? Who would I be without this thought? And then you can add the 4th, do I want to keep it? Tool number 2, I call relationship. And this is the quest of understanding this thought that you've discovered. And that is also going to be done in 2 ways. One is the unintentional model. And you've heard us talk about that. That's the CTFAR, circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result. You kind of plug it in here. And what that does is it reveals, when you think this thought, A, how are you feeling? And you build a relationship with the vibration. How does it feel in your chest? How does it feel in your neck? How does it, feel in your head? What does it feel like to think this thought? Which kind of helps you recognize when it's happening, because you can pair, when I have this experience, this felt experience of life, it's a result of thinking this thought over here. And then you can take a look at, well, what do I do when I feel that way? You can kind of spot patterns. And then you learn, okay, I can pair then this batch of actions with this thought that's here. When I think it, I end up doing these things. If I spot myself doing these things, then I know this thought is probably running the show. And then lastly, to look at the result. And you can see, okay, when I feel this way and I do these things, this is the result that's showing up in my life. What I'm doing is sort of building an understanding of this particular thought and how it shows up in my life, and just different ways that I can spot whether I'm in this thinking or out of this thinking through this relationship. The other part of this is I check on what I call powerful questions. And so the powerful questions that I ask are, where am I believing this thought? And what I mean by that is, where am I taking this thought and I am just not thinking of it as optional? I'm being obligated. Where am I obligated to this thought? Because I'm mistakenly calling it a fact. if you were to look at your model, where am I accidentally taking a thought and saying that it's a circumstance? And so then all of my problem solving, any solutions I come up with, any next moves, any adjustments, they're all limited because they don't include the option to not think this thought. It's taken over. It's a fact in my life. It's running things. So I want to check, where am I believing what I think? So that's the first question that I ask. The second question is, has this belief reached the end of its usefulness? And I really like this one because oftentimes a belief that we have does serve us in life, and then it reaches a point where it doesn't serve us. A great example of this is that hard work produces results, or my work ethic is something that I value. Now, this was true a lot. If I were to take a look at my journey to going from being cut consecutively to making the volleyball team at my college, I credit it with hard work. Hard work is how I did that. If I take a look at the players that were on that team, I outworked every one of them to get on that team, especially the guys that were trying out. When they got cut or they were told they weren't good enough, their motivation plummeted and they were partying while I was playing volleyball. And so if I look back at that time period, I'm like, yes, that's what it was. It was my work ethic. I wouldn't take no for an answer. I never quit. I stayed committed. I went after it. I was lifting. I was running. I was playing it. My work ethic gave me my result. The error I make is then I think work ethic makes results. And the funny thing about work ethic, which I would consider a virtue, is that every virtue can be a vice if it is applied inappropriately or it just becomes out of balance with how much you're doing this thing. Because now, if I look at something like my business, well, there's fear that's going to always be there with business because we don't have certainty. I don't know how the future is going to go. And so there's always a little voice in my head that's saying, maybe it's going to go poorly, watch out, make sure it doesn't go poorly, make sure that you have money, you take care of your family, all of these things. And so when that fear kind of comes up, I might find myself defaulting to my old virtue. Hey, outwork it. Outwork life now. Now I'm not trying to outwork the other people that are trying out for a sports team. I'm trying to outwork life. There is no end to this. There's no time that it's ever time to not work because my fear is always there. So I just work hard and then I check, is my fear still there? Yes, it is. Then keep working. Is my fear still there? Yes, it is. Then keep working. This is now not serving me because now I'm creating a life that is not fun. It's all hustle and grind. Like, why would I have gone out to start my business on my own to be like slave labor to myself? That is not the initial motivation to go out and start a business. And so when I get some distance from that, I can say, okay, that thought used to serve me. It has reached the end of its usefulness. The last thing I check on is, am I getting caught up in good, bad, right, wrong, fact, fiction kind of a conversation? Because if I am, I'm having an unhelpful argument. So if I notice that I'm saying, well, what am I, thinking here that work ethic is bad, I'm going to say work ethic is bad. No, that's not helpful because I'm not trying to determine if work ethic is good or bad. I'm not trying to determine if work ethic is right or wrong. I'm simply looking at a thought and seeing what result is it producing in my life, period. That's it. It may be that work ethic is good for me in a lot of situations, and in this one, I don't like the result that it's producing. And so I try to step out of that conversation, good, bad, right, wrong. So that's the third powerful question I ask. Am I getting too focused on right, wrong, true, false? Third tool is what I call turning the dials. And so the vision of this one is that it's like, if you've got a camera that has a real fine focus and you can adjust brightness and you can adjust focus and you can adjust contrast and you're kind of really understanding, how do I turn these dials to produce the image that I want? So what does that look like in terms of our belief? Well, one of the ways is the intentional side of that same model that we did building the relationship. So we did the unintentional model. We saw what we were thinking from the thought download, and we built the relationship to understand what that was producing in our life. We learned about it. How does it show up in our life? And then on the intentional side, what I want to take a look at is, what do I want in my life? And what I mean by understanding how to turn the dials, it's seeing that if I'm like, okay, I want this result, then I'm going to need to take these actions. That's kind of turning the dial on my result. But I don't want to just be, taking these actions from white knuckle, from dread. Like I dread all these actions, but I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm going to force myself. It's not a good fuel. It's not that effective. And so I want to turn that dial also. I want to understand, how do I turn the dial on the feeling, on the emotion that is fueling these actions? And then I want to learn to turn the dial on the emotion with what I'm thinking. So the thought turns the dial on the emotion, which turns the dial on the action, which turns the dial on the result. So get over to the intentional model. I generally work it backwards. I'm often most familiar with what I want to do. So I start from that action line. I start writing down, I want to take these actions, and then ask the question, how do I want to feel about this? And then in the thought line, so what do I want to be thinking? This is kind of cool because it's actually going to reveal the belief that I'm pursuing. Whatever goes in that thought line, that is the belief that I'm working toward, right? So I've built awareness, I've built a relationship with my beliefs, and now I'm learning to turn the dials. What belief do I want? But I also want to get really specific right here. So that's kind of the second part of this tool of turning the dials. Part 1, the intentional model. Part 2, specificity. I want to get really specific and understand what belief is and what belief is not. And this is going to kind of direct me back towards my question about good, bad, right, wrong, fact, fiction. I want to know that belief is not a pre-knowledge. Belief is not me pre-knowing what's going to happen in the future. And it's not even me learning the truth about my past. Well, I used to think that I was a victim to this and that, but the truth is that it made me stronger. That kind of doesn't really honor the experience that you had, to say the truth is the bad things in your life just happen to make you stronger. It's not that at all. It's that this belief, it's about that event that happened in your past, or it's about what might happen in the future, but its purpose is only for the present. And so when I get specific about the purpose, it helps me kind of do step 2 a little bit better, and then also step 4 a little bit better. It's this inner place where I'm kind of doing the dance between the two, where I am allowed to remind myself that I am not trying to figure out what's right and wrong. I'm not trying to figure out what's true and false. I'm not looking to my past and saying what really happened. I'm saying, what do I want to focus on so that I can take the best action I can in the present that gives me the future I'm aiming at? That's it. That specificity is a really important tool in this process. The 4th tool I call the experience of choosing. And this is one of my favorite because it kind of feeds a little smart aleck that I have inside of me. I like to be a little bit defiant in the way that I think. And this experience of choosing, it lets me go into that playground a little bit and see that I can choose whatever I want. The tool is really simple. It's know your why with a pros list only. So very often we say, oh, if I've got option A and option B, what's a great way to solve this problem? Let me look at the pros and cons. Nah, cons are super uninteresting. Let me just look at the pros. And the reason I say that is that as soon as I start looking at the pros and cons, now I'm trying to predict the future. Now I'm measuring whether this decision was a good decision or a bad decision by what ends up happening in the future. But remember that the belief is only about the future. It's for the present. Now, if I know why I'm choosing, if I know my pros list, if I know these are the results I'm aiming at, and I go into the future and I end up not achieving it, which happens half the time, then if I were to ask myself, why did you do that? Then I get to say, these are the reasons why. I chose because I was pursuing these good things. And it kind of helps me stay out of this, you're an idiot for choosing that. Oh, come on, how could you be so stupid to believe that? Because if I start condemning myself in that way, it makes all future believing more difficult, because now the only measure about whether my belief is good or bad or right or wrong or serving me or not is if it perfectly predicts the future. And I've now painted myself in this corner where in order to build belief, I have to know the future. I don't want to go there, and so I go pros list only. The last tool, the 5th tool, is what I call remaining steadfast. And this one's pretty important because it's our business, right? It's what we built the entire business around, teaching people to remain steadfast. So the first part of remaining steadfast in the pursuit of this belief is committing to the journey of believing. So it's commitment, but it's committing to the journey of believing, not committing to the belief, because that is going to get you in this like pressure performance sort of mentality. But what I'm saying is that I know the belief that I want, and I'm going to take the journey. I'm going to keep moving towards it all the time. And so I will win or die trying is sort of the idea, which sounds like it could be a little pressure producing, but it's not actually, because what it does is it kind of puts this tone around your pursuit that there's no timeline. There's no time you have to get there. You're either going to arrive, or your time on earth is literally going to come to an end and you're going to go to heaven, and then who cares if you achieve this or not? And so it's actually kind of a pressure-free sort of a mentality that I've got this commitment that I will keep on taking the next step. The way I like to say it is I am committed to believing, not committed to the belief. And that way I know that I'm on a journey, and the journey is what the journey is. So the second part of this same tool is self-compassion, because self-compassion is an amazing tool for action. And this is a common misunderstanding among all of us human beings. We think that accountability is the key to taking action. And accountability is good for white knuckling. It's good if you want to fuel with dread and pressure and hustle and grind. Yeah, accountability can help with that. But that's actually not sustainable. That's not an infinite solution to an infinite process, because believing is something that's going to be going on until I die. It's, as far as my life is concerned, it's infinite. It's for the whole time. Whereas all that like white knuckling, it's only like kind of holding on until it's kind of had this idea. And so accountability, sure, it's great for that. But it turns out that self-compassion is actually the key to keeping on going. When I make errors and do it wrong, or even if I'm lazy and I decide to just blow it off and have a mini quit, the ability to tell myself it's okay and believe it, that's actually what's going to keep me going. The way that Whit and I teach this is a script. We say, of course I quit on that and watched TV for the last 3 weeks instead of doing anything that was fueled by the belief that I'm going to make it. Of course I've been believing I'm not going to do it for the past 3 weeks. And I'm strong enough. I'm strong enough to feel the regret. I'm strong enough to feel the disappointment that stems from that action. Of course I did it. I'm strong enough to feel it. Now where do I go from here? It's very positive, and it doesn't say like, okay, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to make any adjustments. Nothing's going to happen. It's actually quite the opposite. It puts you in sort of a motivated or inspired mentality where you actually do make the adjustments. You actually do take the next step, and you actually do keep going in an infinite game that's going to have both victories and defeats. And that's the goal. So my spiel for self-compassion as a part of this tool is that accountability is overrated, and that self-compassion is actually the best way to continue taking action. The third part of this is building your capacity to feel disappointment. You are going to experience disappointment if you're good at believing. Disappointment is actually the cost of believing, because the truth is I can't predict the future, or at least not on a timeline. I can look at things and I can say, okay, I'm believing that this will happen at this time. And then I reach that time and it hasn't happened. That's disappointing. Now, if that disappointment is overflowing the container that I have inside of me to hold the feeling of disappointment, then I'm wrecked. And it must be avoided at all costs. So then I look into the future and I'm like, am I going to believe again? Am I going to believe the next time? And I'm like, no way. No, I'm never believing again. I am not making that mistake. I will never experience that again. Well, that's all coming from this idea that disappointment is something dangerous and must be avoided at all cost. Whereas if you're willing to experience disappointment, if you're willing to sort of reframe what it means in your mind and say, oh, well, maybe disappointment is actually an indication of how well I'm believing. Maybe disappointment is a part of life that I'm strong enough to handle, and I'm okay with this. Maybe experiencing disappointment here and there is what is going to take me toward my dream. Well, then all of a sudden disappointment, it's not so bad. Now, I'm not trying to romanticize it. It still feels terrible, but you can handle it and you're willing to feel it. And so once you sort of change that meaning, then you don't run from disappointment. You're going to experience it. You're going to be in it. You're not going to numb it when it shows up. You're not going to quit when it shows up. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And you'll find that believing becomes less and less risky as your ability to sit with and process disappointment increases and increases over time. And then the things that you can go after, the size of the dreams you can pursue, is growing and growing because it's not so terrifying that the probability is low on success. That probability being low, it's not such a hindrance to you. You can still look at it and say, yeah, the probability is low, but you know what? I'm going to go after it anyway. Powerful, powerful tool to be able to build your capacity for disappointment. So that's the last tool, is kind of looking at those three factors that will lead you toward remaining steadfast, staying on the journey, remaining in the arena, however you want to look at it, continuing to pursue this growth is going to be sort of that committing to the journey and then offering yourself self-compassion and growing your capacity to experience disappointment. Now you have your 5 tools. You've got your hammer, saw, speed square, screwdriver, and sandpaper. You know that what you're looking for is the tool of awareness, the tool of relationship, the tool of turning the dials, the tool of experiencing choosing, and then lastly, the tool of remaining steadfast. Those can go very deep. There's a lot of application that we'll get into in the next episode, so make sure you don't miss that as we talk about the skills that come with applying these tools, with using these tools. But for now, just know that the tools exist, play with them a little bit, do it wrong, try it out, and just know that there really is no more satisfying experience than having the right tool for the job, having the right solution for the obstacle that's in front of you. It's one of the most exciting parts of my job. One of the most fulfilling things to do is to share with someone who hasn't been aware of these tools, that these tools exist, and let them have that freedom to know that you don't have to just keep on thinking what you already think and that what you think matters. It's an incredible, incredible increase of authority in your life, and it is for sure the most fun thing to offer to people. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Ask Steadfast. Whit and I are super excited to use this avenue to sort of spread our message. And so it would mean a ton to us if you'd subscribe to this channel. Additionally, if you have any questions you'd like to see addressed in future episodes, whether serious or funny, we'd love to see those in the comments. So leave that in the comment below, and we'll see you in the next one.